Manx Murders, adapted from his book by Keith Wilkinson. Read by Mark Clift. The Murder of Elizabeth Betsy Crowe.
Elizabeth Crowe was a 45-year-old spinster who lived alone in a small cottage on the old Douglas Road above Ballure Bridge on the outskirts of Ramsey. Known to most people as Betsy, she had 2 cows and managed to make a living by going into Ramsey twice a day to sell milk. At around 5 p.m. on Thursday the 20th of December 1888, she had walked into Ramsey as usual. Later that evening she had called at the house of a friend, William Kane, whom she had known for about 18 months, where she had taken a meal before leaving around 10:45 p.m. Also out that evening was a sailor called Robert Edward Corlett, who lived in Mackald, about a mile from Ramsey. He had been drinking that evening in the Queen's Hotel with a friend, Thomas Radcliffe. Having left the hotel around 11 p.m, they then waited for a while for 2 friends who had been drinking with them. When their friends failed to appear, Corlett and Radcliffe set off home without them. On the way out of Ramsey, they came across Betsy Crowe and walked with her before she turned off at the old Douglas Road. Her cottage lay about a mile up this road at its far end. William Goldsmith was a labourer employed by Ramsey Town Commissioners who worked at the quarry by the side of the hill at Ballure on the outskirts of Ramsey. On the morning of the 21st of December, he was on his way to work shortly after 7 a.m. and was making his way up the old Douglas Road when he was shocked to find a body lying at the side of it. The body was that of Elizabeth Crowe. She lay on her back with her hands close to her chest. There were numerous wounds to the head and the face was covered in blood. There was marked swelling around both eyes. It seemed clear that the lady had been murdered, and the body was taken to the Queen's Hotel at 10 a.m. An inquest was held at 2 p.m. in the hotel to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of Betsy Crowe. Dr. Gell said that there were about 14 separate wounds on the head and superficial scrapes around the knees. One of Betsy Crowe's close neighbours was John Henry Gelling, aged about 25 years, who lived with his mother and sister approximately 200 yards from Betsy's cottage. It appeared to be common knowledge among some of Betsy's friends that there was ill feeling between her and Gelling. As a result, John Gelling was arrested on the day following the discovery of the body. He was questioned over the weekend, and on the Monday morning following the murder, he was brought before the High Bailiff of Ramsey. The inquest was resumed at the courthouse in Ramsey on Thursday the 27th of December, when Dr. John Gell explained that he had made a post-mortem examination of the body. When he removed the skull, he had found blood on the surface of the brain and also a fracture at the base of the skull. William Skillicorn then took the stand. He said he remembered that on the night of Thursday the 20th of December, John Henry Gelling had been at his house. He said he could not remember what time he had arrived, but was sure that he had left about midnight. John Corlett said that on the night of Thursday the 20th of December he had been in the house of Mrs. Gelling, having arrived about 10:20 p.m, and Gelling had arrived home about 12:45 a.m. John Corlett, John Gelling and Gelling's mother had then sat up until about 5:30 a.m. when Corlett left to go home. Gelling told the court he thought he had left his home about 9 p.m. and went to Mr. Crystal's house on the Lezayre Road. Following this, he went to look for John Corlett and walked as far as East Street before walking to Kirkmackald Street and the Skillicorns' house. He left there at 11:55 p.m. and said he reached home about 12:45 a.m, looking at the clock as he arrived. He remembered his mother grumbling about the late hour and that Corlett was in the house when he got home. He confirmed that he had seen no one else after he had left the main Douglas to Ramsey road on his way up the Reservoir Road. The coroner began his summing up. He described the death of Betsy Crowe as one of the most mysterious events that has ever taken place in the Isle of Man. The jury retired at 3:40 p.m. and at 5:03 p.m. returned with their verdict, which the coroner read aloud. We find that the deceased, Elizabeth Crowe, was wilfully murdered on the night of the 20th of December or the morning of the 21st, and we further find, from the evidence adduced, that strong suspicion is attached to John Henry Gelling of the said parish. His mother wept on hearing the verdict. On Monday, the 18th of February 1889, John Henry Gelling was brought before His Honour Deemster Gill at Ramsey. But the Attorney General stood and said, "I do not propose to put any evidence before the jury." The Deemster then discharged Gelling. Many years later, in 1923, Mr. Thomas Christian made a sworn statement before Mr. T. H. Midwood, J.P. Mr. Christian, a Methodist local preacher, said, "At the time of the murder of Betsy Crowe, a man who was ill at the time told me that he had murdered Betsy Crowe. He said he was hard up for money and had followed her up the old Douglas Road. He told me he tried to get the money from her, but she resisted and began to shout. He then caught up a stone and struck her on the head, and she fell down. I informed the police, but they made light of it. The man who made the confession to me died shortly after. I am strongly of the opinion that the man who made this confession did so genuinely." The name of the man who made the alleged confession was never published, and today, well over a century later, the mystery still remains.